Okay, hello. So, have you followed what I have said till now? Then, next, go to the next slide. Now, triple constant of project. These are the three important aspects of project, that cost, time, and scope. And within that particular triangle, there is quality. So, if you can control the cost, scope, and time of the project, then you can ensure the quality of the project. So, let's see how it can be done. So, increased scope means increased time plus increased cost. So, if you want to increase the scope, you want to elaborate more. That means it will take more time to plan and more time to implement, and as a result, that will increase the cost. If you want to keep the tight time, then also there will be increased cost but reduced scope, because if you want to do the job within a restricted period of time, then you need to implement more and more people, and more people involvement means you have to pay more. So also in that case you cannot do the things elaborately, so the scope will be reduced. Now next, if you are trying to implement a tight budget, then the time is increased but reduce the scope. So tight budget means within the restriction of the budget you are trying to implement. So time has to be increased and scope has to be reduced. Let's see. I hope you have understood what I have said. So let's go to the next part. The key areas of project management are scope management, issue management, cost management, quality management, communication management, risk management, and change control management. So let's discuss each of the part individually. Let's define what is scope management. Project scope management is the process to ensure that the project is inclusive of all the work required and only the work required for successful completion. So, whatever is the work that is required has to be defined in a clear manner. Primarily, it is the definition of control of what is and is not included in the project. Now, look at the picture. You can see there is a tire which is used by the young children to as a is a swing, but instead of that, it's not a sleep that has been made. So primarily it is the definition of control. As I was saying, ki students or the children wants a swing, but instead of that, if you are making it a sleep, then it is not actually doing the proper way of project, proper understanding of project. So how that can happen? For that we can uh, let's discuss what is the project scope management. Any change of product or project scope may follow a formal process. The process must finish with the formal acceptance of the change by the different stakeholders. Means whoever is related to the project, they must know what has been happening. So unless those information has been given to everybody, the implementation will become difficult. So a change request may be the result of an external event, that is change in government regulation. Sometimes during the project some government regulation changes, so there has to be some change in the making of the project. An error or omission in defining the scope of the product, that may happen. So in that case again there has to be some changes to be there. an error in defining the scope of the project, some missing inspection, and a value addition of change. So this is quite possible. Actually, it depends upon what kind of requirement of the client is there, and accordingly it has to be defined. So let's give an example. Let's show an example. So let's say this is how we define a customer needs. The customer needs a trolley, and now the customer explains like, "Oh, I want something simple and red in color which is robust with wheels, and that is needed for carrying the things from here to there." But what happens? What the and the customer explains that to the architect, but the architect understands something like this. So if the architect understands something like this, and he tries to design that, and the architect finally described that to the designer person this. So and then the designer and the manufacturer is expected to make this. So actual the customer need this, and the explanation and understanding. So as the different persons are being explaining the same thing in a different manner, so that happens to be the outcome, and finally that is developed. So it is quite possible that the customer need, what is the customer need and what has been finally, there is a hell and heaven difference in making this kind of product. So there is a quite a lot of scope in understanding and designing of the project, and that is a very important aspect. So let's see how this monitoring project scope during the project is important. Now think about this circle as a customer's need, and then customer specifications are given, and then what has been realized means that is by the understanding of the manufacturer or the project manager, and this is something which is not relevant for the project. Then over the intersection part which is does not belong to the customer is the over equality, what has been realized and what are the specification. Then code circuit is the actual part, what the specifications is defined and customer needs is explained. Then obviously these three parts are the amount of errors. This is the waste, what has been realized, what has been produced, but which is done, which the customer does not need. And this part is the something which is happy hazard. So and this which part which is not being revealed, so that is the unsatisfaction from the part of the customer. So this is what the requirement of the this is what is the requirement of the customer, and this is actually understood and made by the project, and without understanding this part is made, so that is why it is termed as happy hazard. And next part is, this is the adequate quality part. So this is what actually the customer need and what has been made by the project manager or the project team. So this part has the adequate quality of the specification of the customer's requirement. This part is done unknowingly, and this part was done with the some specifications of the customer's need. So this is quite interesting way of representing monitoring the project scope and project scope. So let's show something different. So this is an universal tool that has been part of our daily life, and which also contains a knife and something like keychain and all that, and something opener. But might be these two things are actual requirements to define things, and that has been integrated in here. So where some other purposes may serve, but actual the purpose requirement may be this or this. Maybe for the knife, or the purpose of knife is only the scope, or the purpose of bottle opener is the scope. But if you are making this, then it serves the purpose, but maybe in a other manner, and and it could be quite expensive in that case. So it should not be, if it is requirement is this, if a bottle opener, the project should aim to make the bottle opener not a universal tool. So we define a project scope management is a subset of project management that includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all of the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. It consists of initiation, scope planning, scope definition, scope verification, and scope change control. Scope definition. What is scope definition? So scope definition is subdividing the major deliverable into smaller and more manageable components to provide better control. So you try to manage, you to bake the structure, bake the work in such a way so it can be easily controlled and it can be easier to make. So that is the scope definition part. Next part is the scope planning. Now, if the process is progressively elaborating the work of the project, which includes developing a written scope statement that includes the project justification, the major deliverables, and the project objectives. So, scope planning means while dividing the different objects, different parts, different deliverables, smaller, more manageable components, you have to elaborate each part in such a way so that it will be understood to everybody and planned according to the each part separately, and then ultimately integrate the parts, the different components, so that the ultimate project or ultimate objective can be achieved. Scope statement provides a document basis for making future project decisions and for confirming the developing common understanding of project scope among the stakeholders. So it's kind of report that has to be generated in such a way that it tries to find out what was being planned and what was actually achieved, and why there is a difference between the plan and achievement, what are the causes of that, why the deficit happened. So those answers are to be searched throughout the scope statement, and as the project progresses, the scope statement may need to be revised or redefined, refined in to reflect approved changes to the scope of the project. As we have said earlier, that not much not much in code changes can be done in the project. Only some peripheral changes may be done to improve the scope and improve the planning and improve the implementation of the project. And finally, the scope verification is formalizing the acceptance of the project scope, and after checking and rechecking what was predefined, what needs to be done, what are the corresponding changes that is there that will be related. So those things can be implemented after the verification.